Welcome to Shatter.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. It was a dinner party, not a fight, not a breakdown, not even an argument. Just 20 people, some jazz in the background, wine glasses clinking, soft laughter. A house filled with people who used to admire us. People who thought we were the perfect couple. People who didn't know we hadn't touched each other in weeks. I was standing beside her, arm casually behind her back, like a man protecting something he still believed was his. She wore red, her power color, she called it. I smiled when she caught someone's attention. I always did. I was proud of her once. Maybe I still was, even after everything. And then he showed up. Tall, confident, that kind of charm you can't teach. He made everyone in the room lean in just a little, including her. He asked what she did now, and she laughed. One of those flirty, high laughs that didn't belong to me anymore. Then, like it was nothing, she said it. Oh, Jake? He's convenient. Not exciting. The room didn't react. Nobody gasped. But I felt 20 glances land on me, then quickly turn away. Even the music seemed to quiet, just for a second. My glass was still in my hand. My pulse didn't spike. I didn't flinch. I just looked at her. And she didn't look back. That was the first time I realized I had disappeared in front of everyone. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult me directly. But those 4 words stripped more dignity than any public fight ever could. I excused myself quietly and walked to the hallway, pretending to take a call. But really, I just stood there, staring at the family photo hanging near the stairs. Our anniversary trip to Colorado. We looked happy. I remembered thinking that day, I think we're getting back to normal. What a joke. I stayed silent for the rest of the night, not out of restraint, but because something inside me switched off. It wasn't rage. It was calculation. She didn't even know what she'd done. That's the worst part. Her words weren't meant to destroy. They were casual, lazy. She didn't expect me to break, because she didn't think I was even breakable. That night, after everyone left and the house smelled like wine and perfume and leftover candles, I lay next to her in bed. Her back was turned to me. Of course it was. She said, "You okay?" I said, "Yeah." I didn't ask what she meant earlier. She didn't apologize. And that was the moment I knew. She didn't see it. She didn't see me. She hadn't for a long time. So I stopped reaching, stopped trying, stopped needing. And in that pause, in that cold silence between 2 people who used to be in love, I began something new. Not revenge. Not escape. A calculation. I would leave without a sound. Not to punish her, but to remind her of what silence really feels like when it's permanent. To vanish, without anyone realizing I had already started walking away. The next day, I walked into work like nothing happened. Smiled at the front desk, nodded through the usual greetings, logged into my computer, and started responding to emails like my world hadn't cracked open the night before. But everything had changed. Not outside, inside. Something in me had gone cold, precise. Later that afternoon, I had lunch with Michael, my closest friend at the firm. We'd been through enough together to read each other without words. Over sandwiches, he leaned in slightly and said it low, like it wasn't supposed to matter. "Hey, you ever notice your wife's always texting that guy from her nonprofit board?" I looked up. He said, "I only mention it 'cause I saw them last week." Looked close. He didn't press. He didn't have to. I nodded, bit into my sandwich, and pretended my appetite didn't vanish completely. I knew the name. Andrew. Former corporate lawyer turned humanitarian influencer. The kind of man who knew how to say just the right thing in front of an audience, and the exact thing to say behind closed doors. I'd seen the way she lit up when she talked about him. I just hadn't let myself feel it. Until now. That night, I got home early. She was in the living room, on her laptop, laughing softly to herself. She didn't even notice I was there. I stood behind her for maybe 5 seconds, then walked to the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water, and leaned against the counter. I asked how her day was. She said, "Fine," without looking up. I watched her fingers dance across the keyboard. I didn't ask who she was texting. I didn't need to. It was the first time I realized I'd been living in a house full of signs. But I wasn't reading them. I was just surviving them. After she went to bed, I sat alone in the dark, my laptop glowing softly in front of me. And I started looking. Not for accusations, just facts. Her Instagram likes, her Venmo payments, her calendar entries. A few receipts in the junk drawer. A hotel reservation 2 towns over, listed under her name, a single night. My breath didn't catch. My hands didn't shake. I just stared at the screen. I wasn't even surprised. It wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about pattern recognition. I closed the laptop and sat back. The version of me she thought she knew. The man who would ask questions, beg for clarity, spiral into anger. He didn't exist anymore. I was becoming someone else. Not reactive, not emotional, strategic, quiet. And in that silence, I began to build a plan. No confrontation, no scenes, just a shift. She wouldn't even know it had started. But from that moment forward, everything I did was with one quiet purpose: to leave in a way she would never forget. Not because I exploded, but because I vanished. And in that empty space, she'd finally hear the echo of everything she'd ignored. I didn't confront her. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even raise my voice. Instead, I started collecting. Not for revenge. Not for leverage. For clarity. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. And I needed to stop lying to myself about what this was. What we had become. The first piece came easy. A bank notification I'd never seen before. A sudden charge at a boutique hotel across town. She was supposed to be at a fundraiser that night. I remembered she wore a green dress and left without kissing me goodbye. Said she was running late. I clicked into the bank app. The charge was under her card, but the receipt had 2 drinks listed and a dessert she never orders. She doesn't even like tiramisu. The second piece was buried in her iCloud backup. Not snooping, just observing. Our devices were still linked from when we got new phones. She'd forgotten. I hadn't. I saw a text preview on my iPad 2 nights later. It wasn't scandalous. Just simple. Missed you last night. Still thinking about that hallway moment. That's all it took. Just 12 words. 12 words that made the floor shift underneath me. I didn't even have to read her reply. It wasn't about infidelity at that point. It was the pattern, the timing, the consistency. She hadn't slipped. She had shifted. She had changed the channel on our marriage, and I was still watching the old broadcast. I began to study her the way you study someone who's already left emotionally, but hasn't physically packed a bag. Every smile that seemed rehearsed. Every good night that landed flat. Every touch she used to give so freely now replaced by distance. I saw it all. She was already somewhere else. But here's what she didn't see. She didn't see the way I had started to mirror her silence. She didn't notice the shift in my eyes. She didn't notice that I no longer leaned in. That I no longer asked where she was going. That I stopped trying to close the distance. She thought I was just tired. And in a way, she was right. I was tired. But not in the way she thought. Not tired from work. Not tired from routine. I was tired of begging for scraps of connection. Tired of asking questions I already knew the answers to. Tired of being the only one still trying to protect something she'd already walked away from. And in that tiredness, I found something else. Focus. Every night for a week, I sat at the kitchen table after she went to bed. I compiled screenshots, timestamps, and fragments of conversations she probably thought were deleted. I saved them all to a private folder. Not to use, just to understand. And I realized something. This wasn't a betrayal. It was a slow erasure. A quiet, consistent decision to remove me piece by piece, until there was nothing left but the shape of a man she used to love, and now barely tolerated. She hadn't cheated on me. She had stopped choosing me. And maybe that was worse. So I stopped showing up emotionally. Stopped engaging with the illusion. I let her have the silence she kept creating. But unlike her, I was using mine. Every quiet moment was another thread in the web I was weaving, not to trap her. To free myself. I didn't pack a suitcase. I didn't slam the door. I didn't leave a letter on the table. I just vanished. It started with my presence. I stopped being available. I stopped being where she expected me to be. The first night, I came home late. No explanation. No excuse. She didn't ask. Just looked up from her phone, blinked once, then went back to scrolling. I ate dinner alone at the counter. She went to bed early, like she was rehearsing life without me. The next morning, I left before sunrise. No note. No goodbye. Drove 2 hours out of town and worked remotely from a co-working space in a city she'd never think to check. I turned off location sharing. Disabled access to my calendar. Changed the PIN on my bank card. That night, I didn't come home at all. She called once. Then texted, "Where are you?" I didn't reply. I stayed in a cheap roadside motel. No frills, no noise. Just the hum of the air conditioner and the glow of silence. The next day, I transferred half my savings to a new account. Bought a prepaid SIM card. Booked a private mailbox under a different zip code. Quiet steps. Each one deliberate. Each one permanent. She texted again. Can we talk? Still, I said nothing. Because silence, when chosen with intention, is louder than any confrontation. By the third day, the tone of her messages changed. They weren't cold anymore. They were panicked. Are you okay? Please, just say something. She even called my assistant. Said she hadn't heard from me. Asked if everything was all right. He told her I'd taken a few personal days. That I was alive. Just unavailable. Her silence after that said more than her words ever could. She knew. Not what I'd done. But that something was shifting. That she wasn't in control anymore. That the man she thought would always be there, no matter how far she pushed, was no longer chasing. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt calm. Not because I hurt her. I didn't want that. But because I had finally stopped abandoning myself to keep someone else comfortable. Back at the motel, I sat by the window and watched headlights glide past in the distance. I thought about the life we'd built. Every photo, every shared password, every holiday plan now dissolving like ink in water. And I didn't feel grief. I felt clarity. She had disconnected slowly, passively, with the kind of emotional cruelty that wears no scars. But me? I was disappearing all at once. Not from pain. From purpose. It wasn't escape. It was strategy. And the beauty of it was, she wouldn't realize the full weight of my absence until it was too late to reach me. She didn't know it yet. But I was gone. Not to hurt her. Just to remember who I was before she forgot. His name was Andrew. The humanitarian. The good guy. The man who understood her. Or so she once said. Like I didn't spend years listening to her cry at 2 a.m. Holding her through anxiety attacks. Making sure she had gas in her car and food in the fridge when her world fell apart. Andrew showed up clean, late in the story, without carrying any of the weight I did. She called him refreshing. I called him what he was, convenient. A new chapter with no past. But what she didn't realize was that every perfect man has a weakness. I just had to find his. And I did. It started with his LinkedIn. From there, I found an old business registry from when he ran a consulting firm 3 years ago, shut down fast after a quiet lawsuit. No details, just a line about arbitration and a dissolved partnership. Most people would miss it. I didn't. Digging deeper, I found the complaint. Misuse of donor funds. Nothing criminal, but enough to stain a man like him. The kind who preaches integrity but bends it in the shadows. I printed it. The receipts. The statements. The settlement. Kept copies. No digital fingerprints. No emails. No trail. And I didn't expose him directly. I sent it anonymously, via mail, to the director of her nonprofit. Clean envelope. No return address. No message. Just the facts. Then I waited. 3 days later, she came home late. No greeting. Just silence, heavier than usual. She went straight to the bedroom. No phone calls. No texts. The next morning, I heard her pacing. Angry. Panicked. A few minutes later, she slammed a drawer. I already knew what happened. He'd been asked to step back from the board. Quietly. Professionally. But people talk. Whispers move fast when reputations crack. She didn't say a word to me about it. And that's how I knew it hit hard. She stopped bringing him up completely. No more he said this, or he's helping with that. His name vanished from the air like smoke. Not because she wanted it to. Because she had to. But I didn't gloat. I didn't ask questions. I acted like I didn't even notice. And that silence, again, was louder than any revenge. He didn't fall because I pushed. He fell because I watched. Because sometimes the most powerful move isn't to destroy someone. It's to hand them the rope and step back. She wasn't humiliated publicly. But the shift had begun. Quiet. Strategic. Untraceable. The life she built around attention and admiration had a crack in it now. A private one. And I was no longer the man in the background. I was the one pulling threads. Not to win her back. To break free. People talk. Not always loud. Not always obvious. But eventually, silence folds into whispers, and whispers grow teeth. It started at brunch. Her sister's birthday. I wasn't invited, of course, but I knew she went. I knew who would be there. Friends. Family. People who used to call me by name. People who saw our filtered life on Instagram and believed in the version we performed. But that day, something cracked. One of her friends asked where Andrew was. She brushed it off, smiled, and said, "He's taking a step back from public work." But someone else, a cousin who'd been in finance, who wasn't easy to lie to, raised an eyebrow, said quietly, "I heard the board found out some things." Then shrugged. "Guess not everyone's as noble as they pretend to be." That was the first hit, and it landed. Not publicly, but precisely. Later that week, she came home different. Not angry, guarded. Like someone walking barefoot through broken glass, hoping no one noticed the limp. She started texting less, laughing less. Her phone didn't light up the way it used to. Something in her had tightened. At a family gathering the following weekend, I showed up. I wasn't supposed to be there, but it was my father-in-law's birthday. I shook hands, kept conversation shallow, and watched her across the room. She looked at me like I was a stranger. No hatred, no warmth. Just confusion. Like she didn't recognize this version of me. The quiet, centered man who wasn't chasing her anymore. Who wasn't watching her every move, hoping for scraps of affection. Midway through dinner, her aunt leaned in and said, just loud enough for others to hear, "You used to smile more when he walked into a room." No judgment, no accusation, just observation. And she froze, because it wasn't about me anymore. It was about her, about how she was being seen, not as the adored one, but as someone unraveling, someone who had something, let it rot, and was now living with the echo of her own choices. I didn't say a word, didn't gloat, didn't smirk, just stood up, excused myself, and left without drama. She texted later that night. Just 4 words. "Can we talk soon?" I didn't answer. The truth is, her world wasn't falling apart because of me. It was folding in on itself because she built it on perception, on the illusion of control. And now, piece by piece, that control was slipping through her fingers, and I wasn't there to catch it. That's the part she never expected. That I would step back. That I would let people see her without the story she used to tell. And worst of all, that I'd do it without ever raising my voice. The thing about silence is, it starts externally. Missed calls, unanswered texts, doors that don't open, but eventually, it moves inward. It becomes the soundtrack of your own thoughts. And that's where she was now. Alone. Not because I left, but because I stopped returning. She began reaching out to the same people who once echoed her confidence. Her sister, her closest friend, her old coworkers. But the tone had shifted. Their responses grew shorter, less enthusiastic. The subtle pullback you only notice when you're already drifting. At first, I thought she'd fight it, reassert her presence, push back with that same stubborn charisma she used to own every room. But she didn't. She just faded, and no one followed. I watched from a distance, not in person, not online, but through absence, through the fact that she hadn't posted anything in 2 weeks, that her social circle had stopped tagging her, that our mutual friends, once careful about choosing sides, now spoke to me with a tone that used to be reserved for her. She was losing the one thing she built her identity around, attention, and I didn't say a word. I still slept in the house some nights, still poured my coffee, still left early. But the difference was in the weight of the air between us. Heavier now, cold, but not tense, just empty. She'd try to make small talk, comments about the weather, her schedule, things that once filled time. I responded with a nod, a glance, sometimes a half smile that never reached my eyes. And that, more than words, broke her. Because I was there, but not for her. I became something she couldn't control or access. Like fog, like smoke. Present, but unreachable. One night, I walked in and found her sitting at the edge of the bed. No TV, no music, just silence. She looked up, like she wanted to say something. But nothing came out. I didn't stop walking. She didn't follow. The next morning, I saw her in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. She looked at me, paused, then looked down again. People assume collapse is loud, doors slammed, voices raised, something dramatic. But her unraveling was quiet. No tears, just stillness. And that was worse. She wasn't being punished. She was simply excluded. From my energy, my time, my presence. I was still in the same house, but I was no longer in her orbit. And that's when it hit her. She hadn't just lost my affection. She'd lost access. And when a man goes cold, not out of rage, but out of clarity, there's no warmth left to return to. It finally happened on a Tuesday. No trigger, no event, just a still evening with nothing left to pretend about. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my laptop, headphones in. She stood in the doorway watching me. I didn't look up. I didn't pause. Eventually, she spoke, carefully, like every word might crack the air between us. She asked if we could talk. I took off one headphone, waited. She started slow. Said things hadn't felt right for a while. That we drifted. That she'd been overwhelmed. That maybe we should try to reconnect. Maybe see someone. Maybe take time to talk. She used the word maybe 5 times. And in every version of this moment that I'd imagined, I thought I'd feel something. Anger. Sadness. Closure. But I didn't. I just felt finished. I didn't respond right away. Let the silence do what I couldn't say aloud. She waited, hoping for a version of me that used to beg, that used to explain, that used to fight for one more inch. But I was gone. Not physically, emotionally. And that version of me, the one who needed her permission to feel seen, he wasn't coming back. So I kept it simple. I said we'd already had all the conversations, that the silence between us was louder than anything she'd just said, that I wasn't angry, just done. She blinked, like I'd spoken in a language she'd never heard before. She said she didn't realize it had gotten this far. That's what hit me. She didn't realize. Because she never noticed I'd stopped talking, stopped hoping, stopped waiting. She asked if I was seeing someone else. I told her no, because I wasn't chasing anything new. I was rebuilding something old. Myself. She stood still for a long time, searching my face for some crack, some doorway back in. There wasn't one. I could see her calculating now. All the old tools she used, emotional pull, softness, guilt, none of them worked anymore. They bounced off me like water on stone. That's what happens when a man heals in silence. He becomes untouchable, not cold, just clear. Eventually, she sat down across from me and asked one final question. Is this really it? I looked at her, and I swear I saw the woman I used to love. The one who once lit up when I walked in the room. The one who used to laugh without reservation. The one who used to make home feel like something I wanted to come back to. But that woman was gone, and I couldn't keep chasing her ghost. So I nodded. That was it. No shouting. No accusations. Just the quiet sound of a door closing without a slam. It didn't happen all at once. Collapse never does. It comes in fragments, subtle, quiet, like glass cracking beneath the surface before it finally shatters. She started to unravel in ways I recognized, but no longer responded to. Mornings got later. Calls went unanswered. Her clothes stayed folded in laundry baskets for days. She moved slower, less certain, like her world had shifted beneath her feet and no one had offered to steady it. Only now, there was no one left to steady it. The friends who used to orbit her pulled back, not out of cruelty, but discomfort. People notice when someone loses control, not in chaos, but in posture, in energy, in presence. She still looked polished, still smiled when necessary, but the spark behind it had dulled. I'd hear her on the phone in the other room, voice low, trying to explain something no one had asked, apologizing for not replying, mentioning she was just tired lately. But tired isn't the same as alone, and the people on the other end could feel the difference. Even her sister. They used to talk every day, then it became once a week, then nothing. I was already gone by then, not from the house, but from her atmosphere. And that's what mattered most. She was living in the echo of someone she thought would always be there. I watched her try to fill the silence. She reorganized the bedroom, rearranged the living room furniture, changed her hair, bought a new set of wine glasses we didn't need. Like aesthetics could rebuild what she dismantled emotionally. But nothing stuck. Because when connection dies, decoration doesn't fix it. One night, I came home late. She was sitting on the floor in the dark, back against the wall, knees pulled to her chest. No wine, no phone, just stillness. I walked past her, not out of cruelty, out of resolve. She didn't ask me where I'd been. She didn't reach for me. That part of her, the part that used to try, was gone now too. And that was the final fracture. Because collapse isn't about the loud moments. It's about the quiet ones, when you realize there's no one coming to save you. That the person you counted on to always be waiting isn't waiting anymore. She didn't cry. She just sat there, a woman surrounded by the life she built, now too heavy for her to carry. And for the first time, I saw it in her eyes. She didn't want me back. She wanted the version of herself that existed when I still looked at her with light. But that man, he was gone, and her world, every piece of it, was finally catching up to that truth. It ended without ceremony. No final argument. No emotional storm. Just a morning like any other. Gray light through the blinds. Coffee dripping. The sound of a world still turning. I stood in the doorway of the living room, watching her from behind. She sat curled up on the couch, knees pulled in, phone resting face down beside her. She didn't know I was watching. Or maybe she did. At that point, it didn't matter. The version of us that used to exist, the laughter, the shared playlists, the inside jokes only we understood, that was a story from a different life. One neither of us could reach anymore. She looked small now. Not in stature, but in presence. Diminished. I thought I'd feel guilt. Some last flicker of obligation to stay a little longer. To offer a kind word, a hand on her shoulder, a parting gesture to soften the edge of what was coming. But I didn't. I felt calm, clear, complete. I walked to the kitchen and left a small envelope on the counter. No dramatic letter. Just the last key, the garage remote, and a single note inside. For words, written in ink. You'll understand in silence. She never heard the door close. And I didn't look back. Outside, the sky was flat, quiet. I climbed into the car, started the engine, and pulled away from the driveway we once shared. Every memory in that house felt like a photograph left too long in the sun. Faded, brittle, no longer sharp. I didn't have a destination, just direction. The phone buzzed once. I didn't check. I turned it off and dropped it in the glove box. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the window. Not sad, not angry, just weightless. It's strange how a man can carry the same frame, wear the same clothes, but feel like an entirely different person once he chooses himself over being chosen. She never believed I'd walk away. That was her mistake. Not because she didn't think I could, but because she didn't think I'd ever want to. She thought I'd wait. Always. And maybe once, I would have. But a man who's been invisible too long eventually stops trying to be seen. He learns that peace doesn't come from being understood. It comes from letting go of the need to explain. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't punishment. It was release. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. Real men don't explode. They exit. Subscribe for more power stories.